Namaste, dear learners. Today we will discuss another topic of optional English first paper, BA 5th semester, Rani Channamma, University, Belagavi. We will discuss theory of criticism and creation by Matthew Arnold. In today's lesson, we will discuss criticism, critic, and functions of criticism, which are propagated by Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold was born in the year 1882 and died in the year 1888. He was a poet, critic, and he was one of the most significant writers of the late Victorian period in England. He occupies a prominent place in the history of literary criticism. His essay, The Function of Criticism at the Present Time, was published in his first collection of critical writings, Essays in Criticism, in the year 1865. In the essay, Arnold states that criticism should be a dissemination of ideas, an unprejudiced and impartial effort to study and spread the best that is known and thought in the world. Arnold defines the role of a critic as the one to view an object for what it really is, to bring best ideas to the masses, and to create an atmosphere that fuels the literary genius of the future. According to Matthew Arnold, literary critic must inspire a person to write more and more creatively, and it bring about it must bring about the fresh ideas out of a creative writer. Arnold also likens criticism to creativity, citing how the writing of criticism gives rise to a creative joy that comes from original writing. Arnold believes that for the production of great literary work, the power of man and power of the moment must come together. If one of them is absent, the work will not become great, for which he gives the example of Goethe and Byron. He argues that unlike Wordsworth's opinion on criticism, it must be considered as a form of art for its vital contributions to the literary world and society in general. It is a form of exercising pre-creativity. He also states that criticism paves the way for creativity. Arnold believes that criticism is a way to understand life and the world, and can be linked to the satisfaction derived from creative writing. Definition of criticism by Matthew Arnold. The function of criticism in the present time is largely made of ideas that Arnold discusses in his study of poetry. He defines criticism as a disinterested endeavor to learn and propagate the best that is known and thought in the world, and thus to establish a current of fresh and true ideas. The term disinterest, in the view of Arnold, refers to being an impartial and just reader. A critic needs to be free from two prejudices. They are historical and personal. Historical prejudice is when the critic resorts to view through the lens of past and neglects the present in the work. Personal prejudice refers to a personal linking that can cloud the judgment. Uh, Arnold Arnold believes that for the production of great literary work, the power of man and power of the moment must come together. If one of them is absent, the work will not become great. To illustrate this, he takes the example of Goethe and Byron. Both had great productive power, yet Goethe's works was more powerful because uh, he had a rich cultural background. He also mentions how Shakespeare was not a deep reader, which affected his work, but his fame and glory were a result of his age and a climate of great ideas. Next, we will discuss functions of a critic. By the definition of criticism provided by Arnold, the task of a critic is threefold. The first task is the critic's duty to learn, and for that, he must see things as they really are. The second task is to hand on this idea to others, to convert the world, to make the best ideas prevail. The third task requires the critic to create a favorable atmosphere for the creative genius of the future by promoting a current of ideas in the highest degree, animating and nourishing to the creative power. Without the prevalence of best ideas, there will be a cultural anarchy. Matthew Arnold believes that there must be a coordination between the past and the present. Then only there will be a great work of art. If there are no best ideas in the world will fall into anarchy. Arnold also observes that to recognize the greatness of a literary work, one has to look beyond the social ideas and influences that cast shadows and opinions. Further, he indicates that two powers must converge to create a great piece of literature: the power of man and the power of moment. In the quest to be a critic, Arnold believed that one must not confine to the literature of his own country but should draw substantially on foreign literature and ideas, because the propagation of ideas should be an objective endeavor. Scott James says that Arnold places the critic is the position of John the Baptist, preparing the ways for one whose shoe he is not worthy to unloose. Thus, Arnold has a high conception of the vacation of a critic. What is the role of a critic? Arnold suggests that the function of criticism at the present time is to make itself inherently valuable in itself. Whether the value springs from bringing joy to the writer or from making sure that the best ideas reach society are irrespective. In this regard, Arnold mirrors Aristotle's view of poetry while he explains that the highest function of humankind is exercising its creative power. Criticism performs another important function as well. It rouses men out of their self satisfaction and complacency by seeking complacency complacency uh, of criticism makes their mind dwell upon what is excellent in itself and makes them contemplate the ideally perfect. Therefore, the critic must rise above practical considerations and have ideal perfection as his aim in order to make others rise to it as well. The creative power develops if the criticism is used to help create new ideas. The best ideas on every matter which literature touches should be current at time. The flow of ideas uh, wherever they are, therefore, a good poet must not be partisan. Arnold argues that a lot of literature from European nations has been used for the purpose of criticism, but England has failed to produce and encourage significant amount of critical writing due to the attitudes of writers towards criticism. He takes the example of Wordsworth to illustrate this further. Wordsworth believed that critical writing was a waste of time for the author as well as the reader. He also states that great harm can be done through critical writing, but little harm occurs through means of creative writing. But Arnold defends these views by arguing that if a man has talent in one line of writing, he must not be forced to create original writing under the pretext that critical writing is of no value. It is almost too much to expect a poor human nature that a man capable of producing some effect in one line of literature should, for the greater good of society, voluntarily doom himself to impotence and obscurity in another. Arnold goes on to point out the paradox of Wordsworth's beliefs on criticism, as Wordsworth had indulged himself in being a critic by writing against literary criticism. The poet ought to know life and the world before dealing with theme in poetry and life. According to Arnold, a poet is one who deals with the theme in poetry and life. In modern times, things are very complex. The creation of a modern poet to be worth much implies a great critical effort behind it. Uh, However, the definition of criticism as the endeavor in all branches of knowledge, theology, philosophy, history, art, and science to see the object as in itself is really is makes it a necessary prerequisite for valuable creation. The poet is needed when the epoch is an epoch of expansion, a period in human cultural history where the intellectual energy is set at its highest. to convert, synthesize the intellectual cultural movement into great works of art. A critic, on the other hand, is needed during epochs of concentration because only through honest criticism we can make the best ideas to prevail, and it can give rise to a cultural anarchy. Only when the power of man and power of moment come together can a good piece of literature be created. Arnold also states that criticism may produce in its practitioner a sense of creative joy. He compares the emotional state of writing criticism with emotional state of creative writing. In this, he dispels the typical censure that criticism serves no purpose. Arnold holds that great writing emerges from great ideas and they are manifested when these ideas reach the masses. The critic performs the important task of identifying these ideas with disinterest and impart these ideas to the people. He implies that the period of great creativity and dormant creativity can be traced to lack of objective criticism and public attention as much as to creators of great work. In his argument, Arnold establishes literary criticism as an art form as high and significant as any form of creativity. For according to Arnold, critical writing is an important activity of exercising pre-creativity. It is undeniable also that men may have the sense of exercising this pre creative activity in other ways than in producing great works of literature or art. If some people were better equipped to write criticism, it would be frustrating to insist they channel their talent only for creative original writing. Criticism is necessary because Arnold thinks that creative power works with certain materials, and for the author, these ideas, the best ideas on every matter which literature touches, current at the time. However, authors do not discover these ideas, rather, they synthesize them into their work of art. Therefore, authors do not readily know these ideas, they have nothing to write about. Arnold talks about the power of man and power of the moment. In this context, the author needs to live in a society where true ideas are discussed and debated, where true thoughts are cherished and passed on. Like in ancient Greece or Renaissance England, thus he advocates that good criticism propagates good literature. He Matthew Arnold propagates objective approach. The text or the artistic object is the only reality worth studying. Additionally, the text or poem has an internal structure of references that has nothing to do with the author, audience, or universe. Arnold began as a romantic poet but changed in the middle of his career to become a critic of romanticism. His shift also changed the interest from feelings to that of the ideas. Arnold's view came to be known through his work, The Function of Criticism at the Present Time. In The Function of Criticism, Arnold states that criticism should be a dissemination of ideas and disinterested endeavor to learn and propagate the best that is known and thought in the world. He implies that while evaluating a work of art, the objectivity of a critic is more important than psychological, historical, and social background of the work. In the study of poetry, Arnold introduced scientific objectivity to critical evaluation. He provided comparison and analysis as the two primary tools of criticism. In this, he employed short quotations from recognized poetic masterpieces as the benchmark to gauge the value of works. According to this method, Chaucer, Dryden, Pope, Shelley fall short due to their lack of high seriousness. Shakespeare too falls short due to his emphasis on expression rather than concept. Arnold put works by Homer, Sophocles, Dante, Milton, and Wordsworth in the forefront and ranked Wordsworth as the highest ranking poet. Matthew Arnold says that there must be an excellent action in the poetry. Without excellent action, we cannot consider a poem great because the action of the poetry should be excellent in its approach. And he also propagates about a style called grand style, uh, because he was a classic in his views on the manner and style of poetry, and exercises on enlightening and ennobling influence on human life. In the preface of 1853, Arnold had only alluded to the superiority of the grand style of the Greeks over the colorful style of the English. Wordsworth lived in a materialistic age, which was characterized by spiritual void. Science had made breaches in religious faith, owing to which it had lost hold on people's imagination. Arnold wanted poetry to fill this void if Philistinism, Americanism, and charlatanism were not to become the principles of life. He defines poetry at no less than four places in the lectures on Homer, in the general introduction to Watts' English poets, the study of poetry in essays in criticism, and in the essays on Wordsworth and on Byron as criticism of life under the conditions fixed for such a criticism by the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty. Explaining criticism of life, Arnold writes, the greatness of a poet lies in his powerful and beautiful application of ideas to life. To the question how to live, a poetry of revolt against moral ideas is a poetry of revolt against life. A poetry of indifference to moral ideas is a poetry of indifference to life. Matthew Arnold, uh, who is hailed as the first modern critic and is also called as critics critic for his contribution to the meaningfulness of criticism in the realm of literature. In his work, The Function of Criticism at the Present Time, which was published in 1865, Arnold makes an effort to demonstrate that criticism in itself has several functions and should be observed as an art form, that it as high and important as any other creative art form. He offered an objective method in the field of criticism through comparison and analysis. His methods were met with disapproval from his peers. However, Arnold's method for literary criticism was widely accepted and went on to influence the first 60 years of the 20th century. Arnold has a high conception of the vocation of a critic and the function of criticism. His ideas are a result of the prevalence of cultural anarchy, leading him to take up the mission to bring about cultural regeneration in the literary world through means of objective criticism. His critic is a critic of life, society, religion, culture, national character, and all aesthetic activities. Thank you. In our next class, we will discuss the touchstone method of Matthew Arnold.